Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Today, I want to talk about one of the best soundtracks of all time, and one that was very important in the history of soundtracks and in the history of the music of the era. And this is, of course, the soundtrack to the 1981 cult classic Heavy Metal, based on the comics of the same name. Now, this had great music on it. It was a soundtrack that really was one of the few that kicked off this trend of 80s soundtracks being dominated by popular music, whether music composed for the film or just music that already existed in the realm of pop music that the filmmakers said should be associated with the film. And this soundtrack had a bit of each, but all of the songs were real winners. There was, of course, a song that was written for the film, Heavy Metal Taken a Ride, by former longtime Eagles member Don Felder. And then there was a song with pretty much the same name, Sammy Hagar's Heavy Metal, which was taken from Sammy's Standing Hampton album. And when you look at all of the songs that were very much of the time, not they didn't go back, 40 years. They were putting contemporary songs on this album, which would again become a trend in the 80s and in much of the 90s. You had Veteran of the Psychic Wars by Blue Oyster Cult. You had Radar Rider by Riggs, The Great Open Arms by Journey, Queen Bee, Grand Funk Railroad, Cheap Tricks, I Must Be Dreamin', The Mob Rules, the title track to that Black Sabbath album, another Don Felder song, All of You, The Great Blue Lamp by Stevie Nicks. Really, really great stuff. Now, this also got me thinking, well, a lot of people today have 80s nostalgia. They're nostalgic for the 80s. And one of the arguments I hear is that the pop culture in general was a lot more carefree and it was a lot more fun. And I actually think that there is some truth to that. Now, there was a lot of fun in the 70s as well, but there was also a side of 70s music that was very heavy. It was influenced by the war in Vietnam. It was influenced by, inflation through the nation, heading for starvation, that type of thing. By the 80s, the more negative commentary tended to recede, and what you had was a lot of fun music. Now, it was also the lost decade when rock and roll was unabashedly the most quintessential and ubiquitous genre that dominated pop music. In the 90s, hip hop became a major challenger to the rock status quo. Hip hop in the early 21st century would win that war. The 70s was a cornucopia of genres. Rock remained on top, but there was singer-songwriting music, there was disco, funk, soul, jazz fusion, all the different permutations. And while a lot of those genres made it into the 80s and hip hop became discovered by the wider public in the 80s, rock once again was king. And the rock music of the 80s was probably the last time that you had a generation of rock stars that were creating highly melodic, radio friendly, danceable, sing alongable, uplifting, fun party rock music. Because even by the 90s, rock tended to both harmonically and lyrically and stylistically get more grim. They called it grunge as opposed to glam rock. The party of the 80s tended to be over, musically speaking, in the 90s, just in time for the dot-com boom, or something similar. But this album, I think, really captured that spirit of let's just have some fun. Because all of the musicians and certainly all of the tracks on this album were associated with having a good time. I mean, take it, from Spinal Tap themselves. What's your philosophy on life? Have a good time all the time. And a lot of music in the 80s really made people feel that way. And looking back, before 9/11, the Great Recession, many, 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 many wars in regions that have nothing to do with our interests, pandemics, scandemics, poisons, and all of the rest of it. You look back at the 80s and think, damn, we had it pretty good. And if there was ever a soundtrack to the notion of damn, we had it pretty good, this is the one. That's at least what I think. Let me know what you think. And as always, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.